Okay, we're going to get started. Welcome everyone to our latest local lens. Really excited to have you all here tonight to talk waste to energy. Before we get started, I just want to quickly review our group agreements in case you haven't been with us before. Our group agreements are to create a space for learning and conversation amongst members of community councils and the public. The goal of these sessions are to dive deep into various government structures within the municipality of Anchorage. As part of this series, we agree to treat each other with respect, to recognize our neighborhood's unique qualities, and to allow everyone a chance to participate. Just some Zoom logistics as we get to the Q&A session later on in this event. Please remember to stay muted unless you're called on to ask a question. You're welcome to drop a message in the chat or raise your hand, and I will keep track and call on people as we get to that portion. Please try to keep on topic with your questions and be concise. And then we do stop after an hour. So if you still have questions after that point, we'll have contact information and you can connect directly with the presenters. Additionally, they wanted to make sure they are definitely willing to come and give a presentation at your community council. So we'll drop contact information at the end of the event so that you're able to reach out to them directly if you want them to come give a presentation with you. And now, just to introduce our speakers for tonight, we have Kelly Toth from the director from Solid Waste Services. We have Mark Spafford, our deputy municipal manager, and we have Aaron Hudson from Jacobs. Thank you guys so much for joining us. We're really excited to hear about this waste to energy program.
Yes, and we're excited to be here.
So you guys wanted to start with maybe like a little presentation, introduce us to the topic.
Yeah, apparently I needed some more queuing. No, of course. Let me pull up the presentation right now.
Yeah, of course.
Sorry about that.
No, you're good.
You can see the presentation.
Yep, there it is.
Okay. Thank you very much for the introduction. Just to introduce myself again, my name is Mark Spafford. I am the Deputy Municipal Manager, as well as the Anchorage Hydropower Utility Director with the Municipality of Anchorage. And today we are going to talk about my favorite thing to talk about in a professional manner, which is waste to energy. And I'm going to talk to you all about our thermal treatment facility that we're currently in the process of permitting and designing, which is a transformational project here for the municipality of Anchorage. And I'll kind of give you a little bit of setup and background on me, as well as kind of how we got here, what we're doing now, and where we plan on going. And so again, sorry about my camera doesn't work, but at least you have pictures of me and the whole team that are here. And so I just wanted to give you a little bit of background, at least as far as my position is concerned. So I'm the deputy municipal manager. Funny thing is I am the boss of me. So I'm actually the Anchorage Hydropower Utility Director, and kind of the departments that are within my purview are the enterprise and utilities at the municipality, in addition to the public transit, people mover, as well as the safety program. And so underneath the enterprise and utilities, in addition to safety and public transit, are Anchorage Water and Wastewater Utility, Solid Waste Services, of which Kelly Toth is the current director there, the Port of Alaska, which some of you might be familiar with that, Merrill Field. And again, like I said, the Anchorage Hydropower Utility, which I'm a director of. And why some of these kind of tie together is because I wanted to make sure that the chain of command that is underneath me and my purview at the municipality is clear, because this project that we're going to talk about talks about incorporating the generation of power, which would relate directly to a power utility. We're going to treat wastewater sludge with it, which obviously relates back to the Anchorage Water and Wastewater Utility. Obviously, solid waste is a big component of it. So that goes back to solid waste services. And we're also going to talk about some of the other ideas we have about logistics and the vision for this facility to not only be, a facility for the municipality of Anchorage, but the potential for it to be a statewide facility in order to address some huge environmental liabilities, as well as help to drive, economic development here, not only in the municipality, but also the state. And some of the other kind of cool things that I get to work on and spend time on are some of like the bigger infrastructure projects, as well as helping out on other items where I can. So like helping out and being, in the queue for the Port of Alaska Modernization Program, which is a $2 billion project and the most important infrastructure project in the state, reviewing the stormwater utility, looking at the climate resiliency, which is the plan formerly known as Climate Action Plan, as well as the project that we're going to talk about today. Anyway, I report to the municipal manager, Becky Wynn Pearson, and ultimately to the mayor, Suzanne LaFrance. So I kind of already went over why we're here, but we'll talk about what we evaluated during the feasibility studies. We'll talk about different waste to energy facilities around the world in the U.S. We'll do a brief overview of what the technology looks like, and then we'll let you know kind of where we're at, and then what the next steps are going to be. So kind of like how we started here is, back in from 2016 to 2021, I was lucky enough to have Kelly Toth's job. And during my tenure there, we worked on such things as the new transfer station, which incorporated a lot of different components for the solid waste and recycling system here in Anchorage. We were, a large driver behind it. Was not only because the existing transfer station, if some of you had used that in the past, was sized for, 1980s Anchorage, wasn't even built as a transfer station in the first place, and didn't incorporate our thinking of trying to have the space and the ability to divert as much material from the landfill as possible. And so what this facility did is it gave us another 20 to 25 years of life on the landfill. And I'll get to that slide as I have a dramatic slide that's coming up, and I'll talk about it a little bit more then. But, one of the biggest recommendation from our solid waste master plan was build a new transfer station. So we did that. And after that, we started looking at waste to energy, because if you can think about it, excuse me, let me get back to that. Waste to energy is essentially the ultimate recycling program. And recycling here in Anchorage, as some of you may or may not know, is extremely difficult. A lot of it has to do with the logistics of where we're at, being on an island. And the other part of it is just trying to educate people to do the right thing to keep materials out of the landfill. It's not always the easiest thing to do. So waste to energy, basically the solid waste will go into the facility. The volume gets reduced by 90%, and you increase the length of the landfill or the lifespan of the landfill by 100 years. But again, just to touch on the fact that, this isn't just, the mayor or Mark Spafford or Kelly Toth coming up with like this idea to invest a lot of time and effort into looking at this transformative project. But this was the recommendation that came out of numerous plans that were developed by stakeholders across the community, as well as at the municipality, for things to look at to better use solid waste in a more cost effective and efficient manner. And so one of those that came out of the Climate Action Plan, or what we're calling the Anchorage Resilience Plan, was looking at different waste to energy technologies to better utilize kind of like a stranded resource that we have out the landfill right now. Like I mentioned before, it was a recommendation out of the solid waste master plan, the master plan that we completed in 2017, 2018 was the first master plan since the mid 80s. And the recommendation from that plan in the mid 80s was basically to build the Anchorage Regional Landfill. And so the solid waste system hadn't been reevaluated up until 2017, 2018, when we worked on that plan. And again, like I said, the recommendations from that plan, the two big ones were, build a new transfer station for ... and look at different waste to energy technologies and start conducting feasibility studies of those. And of course, the strategic plan. Now, a strategic plan it's more of an internal facing document that tells people what we do and how we do it. However, a main recommendation from that strategic plan that was developed in-house by staff and internal administration stakeholders was, we need to do everything that we can to preserve the life of that landfill because that's the most valuable asset that the Department of Solid Waste Services has. And even as big as Anchorage is, as big as Alaska is, as some of our, brothers and sisters at other utilities across the state can attest to, there's not much space to build a new landfill, especially in Anchorage, especially given all of the other needs that are competing out there. Like one of the spaces that was looked at when the original site was selected was, Kincaid Park. Another one was Campbell Airstrip. Places like that are people would lose their mind if we tried to develop those areas as like new landfill space, mainly like, especially like the Kincaid one, right? Because there's a whole housing development of which I live in. So, there's not a lot of space, but basically what we need to do and make sure that we are reiterating is that we're preparing Anchorage for capacity, that we have the capacity to serve Anchorage for the next 150 years. And so that's one of the things that we were looking at as part of this project. Because if we don't, we're going to be like some of our, individuals like in Juneau and other communities in the Southeast, where it's like they're having to and already shipping out solid waste and recyclables out of state to like at a very high cost. And it also ties into the fact that a lot of the materials that we're proposing to handle with this project are also having to be shipped out because there's no local way to treat those materials. And that costs an exorbitant amount of money and takes that money from being outside of the economic stream here in Anchorage. But anyway, strategic plan was another one that looked at it. And back to the drama of the doomsday clock for the landfill. Now, this one is a little bit up or dated. We're in the process of updating it. But when we do, we'll see another 30 years of life has been added to the landfill. And this is based on material that's going into it, a material that we're keeping out. But that additional 20 years of or 25 years of space that we were adding was because of the operational changes that we made, not only with the transfer station, but also doing best practices out at the landfill. So it was a combination of capital investment as well as us changing our operations to kind of get as much as we could out of what we had at that time. But basically, those recommendations resulted in two different waste to energy reports, with the first kind of being like a pre-feasibility study or feasibility study, and the second report being basically a preliminary engineering report that said, here's the universe of different waste to energy technologies that involve thermal treatment, and here's what you're going to need to do in order to implement it. Now, if you notice on the report on the right-hand side of the screen, you can see that April 2020 was when it was finalized. And as many of you may or may not want to remember, the pandemic started in March 2020 and things pretty much shut down. So couple that with the fact that the administration changed, Mark Spafford kicked his lunchbox to a different place. The work on this project's just kind of stopped until, not really stopped, but didn't really make any real forward progress until, the LaFrance administration came back. And I came back to the municipality in November of last year. So I've been back about a year in this current role. But we've been hitting hard since I came back. But basically, this kind of tells you about like the different waste to energy technologies that were evaluated as part of the initial study or the feasibility study, with, the first one being incineration with a byproduct of electricity. Of course, people have been burning trash for a long time. And not to minimize that burning trash is like easy or not something that's taken lightly. But incineration of garbage, which is what we're talking about here when I say thermal treatment for Anchorage, is a well commercially proven technology that's used around the world. And the next figure will show all that. But it's been around a long time. Gasification is a process that'll get talked about a lot, but it works best. It's a newer process and it works best on like a homogeneous type of fuel. So not like garbage, which has a bunch of different stuff in it. And frankly, anything that you throw away on your cart would go into a process like this. But it's very, very susceptible to changes in like the type of fuel that's being used. Pyrolysis, that's cool if you're a, associate professor at Penn State University who's treating 1 pound of this on their, lab table. There's just not any proven large scale deployments of that technology to treat solid waste in the manner with which we were looking at as far as like this analysis was concerned. And then of course you've got different processes like biochemical and fermentation, which isn't very widely used, as well as anaerobic digestion, which that tends to work in environments that don't have subarctic conditions. so, so that was another one that was kind of ruled out during the feasibility process as something that we wanted to continue to take a look at. But basically, thermal treatment facilities, like I said, are widely used around the world. There's approximately 3,000 of these facilities. With about this map is a little bit dated, but my understanding now is there's probably mid 70s of these types of facilities in the United States. Of course, there's many in Europe. There's a lot in Japan where they've kind of taken an approach of being able to best utilize this resource for overall power production as well as space, right? Because they don't have a lot of space in Japan or Europe to develop landfills, just because of how congested they are in the population. So they've made the decision a long time ago to invest in this type of technology. But anyway, the thing I wanted to point out with this one is that we're not talking about anything new. It's not like this is an unproven, untested technologies. There's plenty of examples of these facilities working well and working well for a long period of time, including in the United States. This is what the facility looks like. This is one that I like to point out, which is in Sweden, which is kind of, I like to point it out because it's a lot of the questions that I've got is like, this plant going to work in subarctic conditions? Well, there's plenty of these plants in Sweden, in Norway. And I like to point this one out because it's one of the newer ones. And they designed this plant to kind of look like a Viking ship, which if you could think about that, let your mind do the rest of it. But anyway, there's several examples of these facilities in the West. Honolulu, which is, I like to point out, which is kind of in the same boat as us. They're on an island and have difficulties with space and, wanting to do something different with the space that they have available rather than landfill it. And they're similar to us also because we're contemplating treating wastewater sludge as part of this project as well to help kind of knock off two birds with one stone. But what people should also remember is that we already have a landfill waste to energy project, which right now what we use in that waste to energy process, and we've been doing that since 2013, is we basically capture the methane gas that's being produced by the decomposition of waste, and we transport it to, or it's transferred to a facility that's operated by Doyon Utilities, and they generate on a good day about 7.2 megawatts of power, and basically power half of the Army side of J-Bear. So that's kind of like a beneficial use that we've had going on. And basically what that does is selling of that gas helps to, subsidize disposal rates and keep those rates as low as possible. Some advantages, again, like I've already kind of mentioned, this is a commercially proven technology. It's been around a while. The thing I like about this picture is another picture that I get all the time, and not saying that we're going to do that here in Anchorage, but you get a lot of comments about, is this safe for the environment? Is this safe for my children? And this is a facility that's located adjacent to a residential area. I think this one is out of Denmark, but I visited a number of these plants, not only in the United States, but including around the world in my personal travel, which I'll get to that. These facilities are located in the middle of neighborhoods, and with proper emissions control and air pollution control, you're able to have a safe, environmentally sound facility that's in the middle of population centers. But anyway, these facilities have high gross energy outputs, whether it's in the form of heat that's being produced or electricity that's being produced from that heat. Again, there's vendors all over the world. Like I said in the beginning of this presentation, this is kind of the ultimate recycling program. And Kelly can attest to this, but we have spent a lot of time and effort to have minimal upticks in the recycling or the amount that we're diverting from the landfill. And believe me, we try our best. We set up and design our facilities to accommodate that. We work with recyclers all across the state. And what this technology will do is reduce the volume of solid waste that's going to the landfill by over 90% and extend the life of the landfill by over 100 years. Another thing that's worthwhile to note out is that, the organics are burned or thermally treat it out of this process. And so, as some of you may have known or noticed over the years driving by the Anchorage Regional Landfill, is that there's a noticeable landfill gas odor at times. And so, basically, what this will do is allow us to have the operational flexibility to cover and collect as much of that landfill gas as we possibly can, which we can ultimately sell more to a landfill gas provider, Doyon, to convert into electricity and sell to the JBear side or the Army side of JBear. But it also will help to reduce that aesthetic issue that we're having with people driving by the landfill. And again, another big one is, this is going to offset natural gas usage for energy and heat production. And again, when this project was initially envisioned, there wasn't, air quotes, a natural gas shortage that was looming. However, fast forward from 2020 to 2024, this project is, in my opinion, a power production project with a side benefit of extending the life of the landfill. And so that's kind of like one of the things that's developed over time and makes this project even more attractive from a community perspective, economic, as well as like, hey, let's try to keep the costs of our electrical rates down by minimizing the amount of natural gas that we're going to have to import for power production. And the other thing that people need to remember about these types of facilities is they operate essentially like a natural gas or a coal plant. And so what power plant providers like is facilities that have a high reliability. And so this plant, as long as it's properly operated and maintained, is going to be operating 90% of the time, with the other 10% just down for like normal maintenance reasons. But that's a good thing, because what power production companies like is they want to be able to call on something Monday through Sunday, every day of the week. And they don't want to have to worry about, is the wind going? Is it sunny out? Is it the darkest time of year? That type of thing, because they can't plan for that. And it makes it difficult with the way that their system is currently set up to be able to do that. So this will incorporate nicely, basically, into the existing electrical infrastructure that we have here in South Central Alaska. And I missed one thing. Another thing is that this is considered a renewable energy source. Using municipal solid waste to create power, per the Department of Energy, it is considered a renewable energy source when it's underneath 75 to 80 megawatts, which, again, this facility is going to produce between 20 and 30 megawatts of power, which represents about 4 to 5% of the base load, which is kind of equivalent to the size of the hydro plant that we have at Eklutna right now, that the municipality is also part owner of. For illustration purposes, this is what the waste to energy process that we're envisioning for here in Anchorage will look like. So basically, on the left side, the garbage comes in, it's lifted up by a claw or a crane. The crane feeds the furnace or the boiler system. The boilers have water in them. The water gets converted into steam. The steam turns a turbine, and the turbine generates electricity. But basically what happens is this process is a self-sustaining process. So like once the process gets started, basically all it needs is just more solid waste at the sufficient quantities to be able to feed it and keep it so it's self-sufficient. But another thing that is worthwhile to point out with this figure, this cartoon figure, is that basically everything you see from that item, like that tall cylinder that's noted as the scrubber, to the stack, is basically the air pollution control equipment and ash handling. And half of the facility's capital cost, is associated with those air pollution and ash handling control systems. And the reason why I wanted to say that is because, again, people are always, those questions always come up, as they rightly should, about the potential environmental impacts associated with a facility like this. But that's how expensive, that's how important the air emissions control and the air pollution control equipment are to the operations of the facility. Because if you're not operating within your permitted regulations and guidelines, you have to shut the plant down and get it back under control before you can start it back up. And the more that you do that, the less reliability you have and the less money you're making on the project at the end of the day, because you want to keep that up and running. And then, it comes out with power at the end of the day, which is what we're looking at. Some other benefits that we're looking at, as far as, diversifying the revenue streams and the environmental liabilities that we could treat with this process is looking at, again, like I had mentioned, treating wastewater sludge or biosolids. AWU, which currently actually has an incinerator at their Asplin facility at Point Warrenzoff, they actually have an incinerator there that's over 40 years old, that's used to dewater that material that they're looking at getting rid of because of the age of it, the reliability of it, and the capital cost to replace it. So the capital cost to replace that incinerator with a different type of sludge dewatering system is close to $100 million. So this would allow AWU and the wastewater ratepayers for AWU to be able to offset a large portion of that capital investment by investing in the waste to energy project. And it also helps to reduce their O&M because they're not using the large amount of natural gas that it takes to keep that process at Asplin going, as well as the large amount of water that's required to cool that. So it's going to reduce their O&M requirements, reduce their capital outlay, which will help to keep their wastewater rates lower. Also, the PFAS benefit of it, which I don't want to get too far into the PFAS squirrel trail or rabbit trail, but basically there's a huge environmental liability with PFAS. There's a large amount of this material that's been contaminated by just various industrial and firefighting things over the years. And so what happens with that material is when the money becomes available to treat that material, almost all of it has to be shipped out of state at basically a high premium and shipped to a hazardous waste landfill or treatment center like in the lower 48 to be able to treat it. What this facility will do as a way to generate revenue to help to pay it off is be able to treat that material locally by using a portion of the power that's going to be produced as part of it. So that's kind of like a big deal because we can address an environmental liability and we'll keep that millions of dollars every year that's spent on shipping that material out of state and keep it in state, which is a big revenue source for the facility to pay it off, as well as for the municipality and residents here in Anchorage. But basically, benefits of waste energy for Alaska is, again, like I said, 20 to 30 megawatts of power, which whatever we don't use for our soil treatment and PFAS treatment and biosolids treatment, we're going to sell the rest of that of power, which that's going to be another huge revenue source for the municipality in this facility. As compared to landfilling, it significantly reduces greenhouse emissions because basically the byproduct is carbon dioxide and not methane, which is a greenhouse gas that depending on the literature you read is 27 to 75 times more potent than CO2. It significantly extends the life of the landfill. So that means we're not shipping out garbage and we don't have to think about where that material is going to go for the next 150 years. We'll be able to take care of a huge environmental liability, contaminated soils, PFAS contaminated material here locally. This type of facility is easily integrated into the existing electrical power and grid distribution that we have. And depending on the ultimate site selection, if we're able to free up space at the landfill, that will allow us to do other things to help address an environmental liability as well as generate revenue, which is do things like be able to dispose of low-level solid hazardous waste here in Alaska, rather than having to ship that material out of state again at exorbitantly high cost per ton. So basically, I carried around a lot of this stuff in my head for a long time, and with actually trying to get the project developed and get it implemented, this is kind of like all the different things that we're going to have to do as a municipality, that we've hired an entity to help us manage this, Jacobs. And basically, this is what we've put together as far as like a roadmap for what we're going to need to do in all kind of like the big pots, which it includes obviously, the facility. I haven't talked about that yet, but it's anywhere between 650 million and 750 million is like what the preliminary estimates are now for construction. So economics of it are going to be a big deal. Procurement and getting an operator and doing all the things to sell the power and bring in revenue from soil treatment are part of the commercial and the legal process for looking at, okay, how are we going to do this? Obviously, design and how we integrate it into our solid waste system and the existing electrical utility system is a big piece of it too. Permitting is a huge piece of it. The air permitting, which we're working on right now, is kind of like the critical path item, and we need to make sure that we can get an air permit in order to even build a facility like this. Communications, which is what we're doing right now, is obviously a big piece of it. Getting the project delivered and program controls are all just other things that we need to do in order to have a good control over scope, schedule, and budget of something like this. So again, like I kind of just talked about, these are like the completed activities. If you haven't seen what the Anchorage Regional Landfill looks like, this is basically the whole site. It's about 300 acres that we currently have. So it's a big facility, and we've been putting garbage in it since 1987, but it is filling up, and it will be filled up before we know it if we don't start planning for that now, just because of the long horizon and long timeline for projects like this to get things implemented and done. So we've already had the initial investment. The Anchorage Assembly saw fit to grant us an initial $8 million, with $5 million coming from SWS and another $3 million from AWU to get this project started. We've hit the ground running since April of this year. We've hired our program manager, which we actually did a little bit before we got the capital funding for it, with Jacobs, and so they're helping us to herd all the cats. RFPs and work that's currently going on is site selection. That's obviously a big piece of like where this is going to go, where the garbage is going to come from. Waste characterization, which is basically like what is the fuel content or the energy content of the garbage that's going to be coming here. Public relations, we've got the project schedule pretty much done, but that's always being tweaked. We've got the estimate again, which is that $650 to $750 million range. We're working on the long range financial plan for that right now, as well as other stuff, trying to find the operator and get the operator of the facility on board as soon as possible, since we need to get an entity on board to start working with us that's got that experience in power generation, operation of power facilities, and knows the inner workings of the regulatory environment here in Alaska with respect to, power sales and rates and stuff like that. So we're working on that right now. Here's kind of a timeline. We tend to be aggressive here, and given kind of like, the world that we live in, it's better to get things done sooner rather than later, because, if anybody's been here for any extended period of time, which I have, I grew up here and, I've been working around the state as well as, at the municipality for a long time now. Things tend to get studied to death and nothing ever happens. And so we've got kind of the right motivation. We have the right motivation right now. We have the right support between the assembly, the administration. We've got the staff and the ability to do that right now. And we've got I think the environmental, political, and kind of the electrical environment right now, with kind of the need and demand for renewable energy. This is something that we can get online within the next 4 to 5 years, being extremely aggressive about it. And I put down the historic timeline for these projects, which are typically, between 5 or, 7 to 10 years on a typical basis. So we're accelerating that schedule as much as possible. Part of it is going to be the reporting out to entities like this, other community councils on a regular basis, and also giving people the opportunity to see what we're spending the money on and where the project is at. And so we're going to have a comprehensive website that's going to be available to the public, that's going to track, the different types of money that we're keeping in the facility, like in community benefits, where the funding, how that's being spent, the jobs that are going to be created as part of this project, and, different, nerdy project management metrics that are going to tell you how we're on, target with our scope, schedule, and budget. But basically it's to like get that reporting out. So the reason, again, I wanted to show this is because, I have a long distance relationship. In order to see my girlfriend, I have to travel places. She is a world traveler. And so that basically makes me a world traveler. And so I kind of have to follow her around everywhere she goes, that these different places that she takes me to. Like on the left is Japan. On the right is, a recent trip that we took to Lyon here last month for, some personal stuff that she likes to do. But anyway, she takes me to these beautiful places around the world. And then I make her take a look at garbage burning plants around the world because that's just something I'm interested in. And the point that I wanted to make with that is that, even on my free time, on my personal time, this is something that I think about all the time. I wouldn't have come back to the municipality if I didn't feel that strongly about this project. I think this project is transformative for not only the municipality, but also for the state, because we'll be able to treat not only solid waste, hazardous waste, contaminated soils, not only from Anchorage, but from around the state. So we'll be able to logistically get materials to the landfill via rail spur, via the Port of Alaska, and then ultimately on a rail spur, depending on where the final site of the facility is going to be. But this is something that I live, breathe, and eat. And it's something that, the individuals on my team, like the Kelly Toth, Aaron Hudson, who's our program manager, who I didn't mention when we started, is also on this call as well and is working hard. In fact, we had to find, because we lost our program manager from Jacobs and we had to find a new one. Well, we had to go all the way out to Australia to find the right person for the job. And luckily, we were able to talk Aaron with kind of the vision behind this project, as well as having Anchorage just being a great place to live, work, and play. And he's here now, giving us his experience and expertise on, getting this project done as quickly as possible and dealing with me and all my crazy ideas. So that's good. We're kind of working on a bunch of different things as once, and we want to make sure that the public, as well as the assembly and other stakeholders, are kept up to date about what we're doing. Like I said, this is kind of my favorite thing to talk about. The other favorite thing for me to talk about, as you look on the bottom right-hand corner, is I had somebody smart once tell me never miss a time to promote yourself. And I also have been in this town a long time playing music, and I go under the band name Spaff Daddy. And we do our own originals and play blues rock around town, and have done so for, over 30 years. I've been playing in this town since I was 13 or 17 years old on stage. So anyway, that's the project. And I guess I've kind of babbled on for quite a while, and I will, open it up for questions if there are any, and I'll stop
Yeah.
sharing.
Yeah, we do have one question in the chat that I'll go with, and then I'll direct it to you, Pat. First, Kate in the chat said, "Will sludge use alleviate our lack of tertiary waste treatment?"
We have at the Asplin treatment facility, we have a primary treatment technology there. So it involves no secondary or tertiary treatment. We're one of only a handful of communities across the U.S. that have this this type of permit, which is called a 301H permit, which basically excludes us from secondary treatment rules. And the reason why extending or keeping our 301H permit is so important is because converting the Asplin wastewater treatment facility is a $1.5 billion undertaking. And so anything that we can do from an economic perspective to keep that 301H permit is something that we want to entertain, unless we want to just have out of control wastewater utility rates to be able to pay off the debt that's going to be associated with that facility. The other thing that I need to point out is that the Anchorage Water and Wastewater Utility at the Aspen plant meets and has exceeded its discharge requirements for a very, very long time, and it continues to do so on a regular basis. So the short answer to the question is that no, this won't take the place of tertiary treatment. This facility will take the place of $150 or $100 to $150 million capital investment, as well as the millions of dollars that are spent on operations and maintenance of the incinerator that's currently located at Asplin right now.
Thank you. Pat, you have a question?
Well, a question and a comment. First of all, I'm thrilled to see this. I was on the Solid Waste Commission at the time we cited the current landfill out there, and one of the things that was my major interest was waste to energy, and so I was thrilled when we got the current plant running out there. And also, I'm a member of the League of Women Voters, and the reason I joined the League of Women Voters in 1972 was waste to energy. And I'm just thrilled that this is happening. And also I'm familiar with I was on the Water and Wastewater Commission too, so I know about the problems that the solid waste or the sewer plant, and that the fact that we have to do something there and what the cost would be if we ever had to go to any other kind of treatment. So I would be thrilled to try and get more people familiar with this and make them let them know what's going on because I was not aware that we were this far along. So thank you so much for what you've been doing.
Yeah, no, Pat, I appreciate that, and thank you very much for speaking up, and like thank you for your visionary leadership in the '80s to cite the Anchorage Regional Landfill. And I guess what I didn't mention is that this isn't a new process, and it's something that we've looked at even in the '80s, right? This was one of the
Right.
things was like different waste to energy technologies, and so people have been talking about this for a long time, and so it's good that we're finally moving forward with it. So thank you.
I have one other thing. Is there one of my dreams has been to get waste to energy designed in such a way that we could use it in the villages, but to help produce power and to take care of waste in the villages. But at the current time, there is no way we can do that. Is there anybody looking at, how to make it smaller and how to make it work?
Yeah, unfortunately, like this type of technology isn't applicable because of the cost, to like a
Right.
rural Alaska type situation. But like I spent 7.5, 8 years working at ANTHC and the Denali Commission doing water, sewer infrastructure projects. And so one of the things that I was thinking of is there a way, logistically that we could eventually, backhaul all of that solid waste and that hazardous material that's just sitting and being burned, open burned, frankly, for the most part, like in those
Mm.
rural communities, creating, poor community health situations, and bring it to Anchorage to not only supplement, the energy production and and to minimize that environmental impact that we're seeing across the state. But that's kind of like, one of the pipe dreams that I have. I mean, we're looking at that for like the rail belt for like people that can get their garbage to us on an easier manner, and also like talking to individuals that are on the like Alaska Marine Line system with barging their waste north to us instead of south, to
Okay.
keep more of that money like in state. But yeah, no, that's one of the things I'm like really fascinated by that too, that concept.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yep.
Thank you guys. We have a question from Brian. If Eagle Exit continues to gain traction, how does that impact ARS?
I don't know yet. um the only what I've been telling people is like, you know it all depends. And I don't want to speculate, especially given my position. But basically, it's not just like you would get the landfill and that's it. The landfill has a huge environmental liability that is associated with it. I mean, it's in the $1 billion of figures. And so, unless you're a community that can properly bond for that when it comes time to close that landfill, as well as coming up with the money up front to be able to purchase it, which that's in the hundreds of millions of dollars. There's just a lot of like moving parts, not only like politically, obviously, to that, but also just from like a purely economic standpoint about how that would look. So I don't want to speculate too much, but it's not just like, oh, hey, we give the landfill away and walk away from all that investment that all the ratepayers within a municipality took care of, as well as, you got to prepare like we're doing right now for like the ultimate closure date, which when you have to take care of that facility, it's a huge economic cost.
Yeah. No, thank you for that.
Yep.
Sharon asks, what are the potential sources of funding? Are there plans to solicit fundraising investments from the public?
Yeah, ultimately at the end of the day, this would be paid for via a combination of several things. Like if we got no other money and wanted to do and pay for everything on our own, we would use a combination of solid waste disposal fees that we would charge at the landfill or at this facility. It would be a combination of fees that would be collected from the Anchorage Water and Wastewater Utility for disposal of sludge and whoever else would be disposing of that material. It would also be a portion of it would be electric sales, which is not an insignificant, pot of money with, it's in the tens of millions range to pay for that. There's also the revenue generation from the treatment of PFAS and contaminated soils from across the state, which is going to be in the form of millions of dollars, as well as, if we get the correct site, we'll also be able to open up a hazardous waste landfill facility, which will be able to generate, millions of dollars of revenue, for that would go towards the paying off this facility. And then also, everybody talks about federal grants and stuff like that. A lot of those federal, like, there isn't a federal grant out there that's going to pay for half of this plant. However, there are tax rebates and tax incentives that were included in the Inflation Reduction Act and were recently updated by the big beautiful bill that would be applicable. We're trying to make sure that they're going to be applicable to this facility. And so basically what that means, up to 40% of the capital cost that's associated with this facility, as long as it meets the requirements that are drawn out in the Inflation Reduction Act and the modifications being made by the big beautiful bill, we'll be able to pay for, between 270 and $350 million of this facility would be paid for by the federal government through the form of a rebate with a check basically back for them. So we're working pretty hard on that because that obviously has a huge impact on the economics. But that's what my gut is telling me we're going to end on, is we're going to get a significant portion that's going to be funded from the federal government in the form of a tax rebate, and the remaining sum will be paid for through rates, which when you diversify that over 3 or 4 different rate bases, as well as a couple other huge revenue sources, you're able to minimize the impact on, like, my rates, your rates for disposal of garbage, for wastewater disposal, and what you're going to be paying at the end of the day as far as your electrical rate is concerned. Won't do
Yeah.
anything. It might not do anything for your natural gas bill, but it might. You never know. So
And just to follow up on that, your slideshow had something about a $600 million or more price tag
yeah,
attached to this. Is that before any of this is factored in?
no, that's the raw cost of the facility right now,
Right. Before like federal
before
and
federal help assistance,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And I
Okay.
and I know it sounds like a huge number, but when you take out a huge chunk of it, that's basically going to be money coming back. So you're reducing the capital cost by 300 million, and then you spread that, the rest of that over rates between 3 or 4 different utility entities, and you can do that over time, right? So you're not like changing the rates by 20 or 30%. You're able to incrementally increase those rates over time. So it's not like a huge burden for any of the ratepayers. And frankly, we won't do the project if, the public in the assembly says that's just too much for us to bear, especially given, kind of the conditions, the economic conditions and where we're at right now. But something that I want to reiterate is this is a revenue generating facility for the municipality. That is what we're envisioning. And we want to generate as much revenue from it in the form of electrical sales, like fees that we're collecting from solid waste, wastewater disposal fees, treating PFAS, disposing of hazardous solid waste. We're looking at all these different revenue streams to be able to reduce the ultimate cost to residents here in Anchorage and drive
That's
economic development, keep more of that money local, right? And
yeah.
it'll create jobs and dot, dot, dot.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, on a different uh moving away from money, we have a question from Kelly. How about building a park around the new facility, making a ski slope, skate park, and charge a small fee? Maybe we can make the facility fun for the community and more involved.
yeah, so I've been thinking about that particular thing since like 2018, right? And like the coolest one of these facilities that I've ever heard of, besides there's one in Tokyo that has a bar in it that you can like look down and see what's going on in the process of like a bar and a rest sushi bar. Um, is there's a facility in Denmark that, has all those components that were just mentioned. It's got like a, community garden. It's got like an education center. It's got a ski slope. You can run up it and do like pull-ups. It's got a little exercise area, community like, area where people can go and hang out and do, productive things, at this facility. Right. Copenhagen. Thank you, Kelly. Is what it's called. But yeah, I've been trying to figure out a way to like talk my girlfriend into like going to that part of Europe, so that way we can go check that out. But yes, I mean, it would be awesome to be able to have that kind of vision for the facility here in Anchorage.
That's great to hear. Mary Lou asks, are there sites that are being considered?
Yeah, I think Kelly or Aaron, if I'm wrong, I think we're just starting the site selection process. And so I think we're looking at 10 different sites around the municipality, one of which is the landfill. The other one is, the central transfer station, and probably a few of those other facilities that were, looked at back when Pat was making the recommendation of where to site the Anchorage Regional Landfill. So that there's more to come on that. And, once that gets some traction and we make some more progress on that, that's going to be one of the, main things that we request public input on is like, here's what we're looking at as far as sites are concerned. What do you think?
Oh, that's great to hear. We've got another question from Brian. How would the drying pot process be changed over at Asplund if they go secondary? Would the design drying process need to be changed to something different? And if so, what would cost to swap processes?
That's one of the things that we're evaluating right now. So it's, at the end of the day, the incinerator goes down quite a bit. And basically there's a process before the incinerator at Asplin. That's basically like it's called a belt filter press. So it's basically like trying to squeeze out as much of the water out of the what as they possibly can before they send it into the incinerator. And when the incinerator goes down, which is quite frequent, basically what they do is haul that wastewater sludge out to the landfill for disposal. And so instead of doing, one truck a day, that gets amped up to several trucks a day when they have to do that. But, given that trucking is, okay, so like here's an interesting fact that most people probably don't know about, but the majority of the people at SWS are driving in circles every day. So a large part of hauling the waste from the transfer station to the landfill, collecting the garbage from our service area, driving leachate to the disposal area. Basically, they're all just driving in circles. And so a high cost, the biggest cost of your solid waste disposal bill is associated with trucking. So what we're doing, and we're just kicking that off, is like looking at what's the economic benefit of further drying the sludge when we do get away from the incinerator versus just hiring a couple more people to truck it out to the landfill. Because it's not that big of a deal as like you would think it is like when we're moving from an incinerator to just having to haul it. So hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, and going back to your previous question, it looks like Aaron said that you guys are currently developing a comprehensive set of criteria to use in selecting the best site for Anchorage that takes into account all the different types of factors that will be important for the community, the economics, and the cost of development.
Well said, Aaron.
A lot goes into deciding.
Yes.
Um, we've got another question from Sharon. Is pre-sorting waste required? How would that be managed?
No, that's the beautiful part of the incinerator or this type of process is that you don't have to have any real pre-processing for it. So you could throw away like motorcycles, everything that goes into the landfill, you could ultimately throw away into the thermal treatment process. Now, of course, because of the high capital costs of these processes, and you don't want to burn a bunch of undesirable things, we're going to have to double down on our recycling and our diversion efforts because we don't want to burn things that we could necessarily have a better beneficial use for. And we're certainly not going to shut down the recycling system and start diverting everything to the mass burn process instead of trying to better utilize it like we're doing right now. And so some pre-sorting, like in the way of you want to keep as much like household hazardous waste out of the material. Like, you don't want to burn paints and you don't want to burn batteries. So we're going to have to step up our public outreach to keep those materials out of the facility because, that's what tends to cause some of the harmful air emissions that we have to spend a lot of time and effort with scrubbing and cleaning from the emission stream to make sure that they don't go out. And so that drives up costs. So the more we can keep out of that, the better, as well as, again, these cost a lot of money. And if we don't have to build another module onto it at the tune of $150 million because we can keep material out of it, that's what we want to do.
Mhm.
So yeah, so there'll be a little bit of pre-sorting, but it won't be like a huge upfront process or anything like that we'll be using like at the facility itself.
Got it. Got it. We've got just a couple more minutes. So I'm just going to read one last question. If you have any questions, please drop them in the chat. If we're not able to get to your question, they will be going to the presenters and they'll follow up with you afterwards to make sure that they get answered. And so our last question is, which part of this project keeps you up at night?
That's who asked that question? That's a good question. Ev- everything about it keeps me up at night. Um, this is not like doing a project like this is not an easy thing to do. And from a personal standpoint, I have committed a lot of personal and professional capital to making this happen. And I have sacrificed a lot personally to come back to the municipality because this is how strongly I feel about making this project a reality here for Anchorage because I think it's needed. It solves several different utility issues. We have the kind of alignment between the politics, the technical, the administrative side right now to do it. We have the underlying need of like diversifying our renewable power generation. The thing that keeps me up at night, and I think what will kill this project more than anything, is politics. you know, I think this is a very like bipartisan project. It's got good sides from it, from whatever side of the aisle you lean on. And I think if you're an Alaskan, this project is very appealing to us because it allows us to address a lot of those issues with our own resources instead of to have to ship that material, that money out of state like we have to do on so many things. And it helps to keep us from having to rely on, a huge infrastructure project being funded by somebody that we have no control over and kind of keeping our fingers crossed and hoping that that happens one day. But this, we control our own destiny. We're going to make revenue off it, and it addresses a bunch of different environmental liabilities across the state, not only in the municipality. Anyway, I probably shared too
Awesome.
much personal stuff, but it is scary. But that's good though. A healthy dose of fear works very well for me because it helps to keep you sharp and you're thinking about the important things like not burdening our residents economically and trying to address a bunch of different things all at once in a very smart project. And I'm glad that I've got a lot of help and I've had a lot of support from the community and I've got a whole gang of people at the municipality that are helping out and that see the vision and that want this project to happen as well. So happy to talk about it anytime with anybody.
That's so great to hear. And Holly did drop her contact information. If you're interested in having Mark and the team come and present at your community council, please reach out and they'll get something scheduled with you. Kelly, Mark, Holly, Aaron, is there any like final words you want to share with us about the project before we wrap up?
No, I think I've shared quite a bit. I'm good. I wanted to just again let's acknowledge thank you for the opportunity to present. Thanks for everyone for all the really insightful, the great questions. And again, like we're all serious about talking about this project and answering whatever questions we can. And there's going to be a lot more opportunities in the future for people to ask questions and interact with us. So thank you.
Amazing. Thank you guys so much for being here. We appreciate your time. Uh, this is likely our last local lens of the year, so we'll tune back in 2026 for whatever might be coming up. If you have any suggestions, you can email us at info@communitycouncils.org, and this will be posted to our YouTube. So thanks so much, everybody, and have a lovely night.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.